everybody. Hi, it's Becky from the YouTube channel Power Tools with Thread. I am so excited to bring to you the newest design from Designs by JuJu, their Whimsical Advent Calendar. I had so much fun putting this together. You can make this design if you have a 5x7 or a 6x10 hoop, so it comes in two different sizes. You can do it in a single needle machine or a multi-needle machine, and I show you both examples in this video. In this part one, I show you how to put it all together, and in part two of the video, please be sure to check that one out where you can see the finishing, how all the blocks go together, put on the backing, and bind it. While the instructions give you the option to do a self-binding for this, I chose to do a traditional quilt binding using 2.5-inch strips, sewing them to the front and stitching them on to the back. I added little pockets on the back to be able to put in a dowel so it can hang, and that also gave me an opportunity to add a little label. This is really fun and easy to put together. You've got this adorable singing snowman scene with Santa Claus flying across the moon with his reindeer, and then some pretty holly blocks, and then there are all of the pockets for the Advent calendar. You're going to make the pockets 2 at a time in a single hooping. It seems like it might be a little bit technical, but there are alignment lines for you to line up the pockets. You can't go wrong with this. It's really pretty simple. These pockets are the perfect size for a little treat. How exciting. Nothing like some sugar leading up to Christmas, right? This is an heirloom quality project, you guys. If you're fairly new to machine embroidery, the very first part of this video talks about some tips and tricks that I have kind of learned over my embroidery journey that may be helpful to you. If you're a seasoned embroiderer, there are timestamps below the video that you can just click on those and jump right to the part that you might want to watch. I want to thank the So Yeah brothers from So Yeah Quilting in Las Vegas for sponsoring the fabric for this beautiful project. I will put links below to the fabric so you can get your own if you want to make yours look like mine. I had so much fun putting this together. I'm sure you will too. Let's get started. If you're brand new to embroidery, taking that first step can be very intimidating, and I totally get that. I was terrified of my machine for several years before I ever used it. And you do not have to have a big fancy embroidery machine to be able to make this Advent calendar. I started with a Brother PE 770, which was a max of a 5x7 hoop. It had a little bitty brain, not the great big one like the Luminaire has here, but the concept and the processes that I'm about to show you are identical in nearly every embroidery machine. When you get started, you're going to want to pick out your thread colors first, because I don't know about you, but sometimes that was the hardest thing for me. In designs like this, they may give you a thread palette, but that was built based on the fabrics that they used, and if you want yours to look just like theirs, then you could certainly do that. Although they may use a different thread brand than you have, and now you feel kind of lost because you don't know how or what numbers to match. Is there a conversion chart? There are some out there. All I did was I just chose my threads based on the fabrics that I chose for that particular project. And to me, that's how I go about doing it. I do not get all hung up on, I've got to have that particular brand of thread or that particular color of thread, because I may not have the same fabric. So feel free, let your creative juices flow, and whatever fabrics you're choosing, then use those threads that work with that. About thread brands, not every machine likes every brand of thread. I have used certain brands of thread in my Brother machines, didn't like them at all. And so I, through trial and error, have gone through and chosen threads that my brand of machine likes. I don't know why they are particular, but they are. But all different thread brands are made differently. I do recommend you use a 40 weight polyester thread, rayon, or a blend of something like that. That's the perfect weight for these designs, is a 40 weight. I do have a 70 weight bobbin in my bobbin case, and that means that's a lighter, thinner thread. And unlike quilting, where you want your sewing threads either in garment sewing or quilting, where you want the stitches to meet exactly in the middle between the two fabrics, with embroidery, you want those top threads to wrap around to the back, and there would be just a tiny little white line, or black if you're using a black bobbin, but it would just be a tiny little line of bobbin thread, and you would see 2 rows of your top thread on either side of the underside of the hoop. That's a good, healthy stitch. My machine likes Isacord. It likes Exquisite by Designs and Machine Embroidery. It likes Glide thread. I've even been successful with Robeson Antin threads. So you're just going to have to kind of do some testing. I do recommend though that you stay away from the very, very inexpensive threads. My brother repair guy has told me that cheap thread keeps him in business. So do not sacrifice thread quality at the expense of your machine. You might end up having to pay for that, and you'll end up paying more than if you just would have bought quality thread in the first place. Also, when you're going to be working on a single needle machine and you have to remove the hoops, say to trim away applique fabric, I recommend that you have some sort of firm surface where you can do lap work. Or if you're not going to be working on your lap, then you take the hoop to a firm flat surface in order to do any work on the hoop that is outside of the machine. Otherwise, you run the risk of popping the design out of the hoop. And if that happens, you're going to have to start all over. That is virtually unrecoverable. Once that has happened, if the project pops out of the hoop, don't struggle with trying to put it back. Just lesson learned and press on. We've all done it. Welcome to the club. So this is a quilter's cut and press. You can pick these up anywhere. You can get them online. I think I bought this at Walmart years ago, okay? And I use the firm surface. This is perfect. Let me put this down so you can see, so that you can put this in your lap. You can remove the hoop, and now you've got a firm surface, and you can cut, turn it, cut, and you don't run the risk of popping your design out of the hoop. When you take the hoop out of the machine, I recommend you get into the habit of always lift the lever, put your hand on the arm, and gently pull the hoop out. That's going to prevent you from accidentally tugging and moving the arm. If that happens, you're now all off wonky and the machine won't know where it is. You'll have to go back another step in the stitch order so it can figure out where it needs to be, because they don't do well when they get out of alignment. I have got threads on the back of the machine, and I also have behind the machine, there is a thread tree back here. And I've got this listed in my Amazon store, and I like to choose all the threads ahead of time and line them up on the thread tree and get them ready so I'm not having to stop in the middle of stitching and figure out what colors I want to use. The way I will change my threads, if I already have a piece of thread in the machine, is to do it the way it's done in industry. I simply take the 2 tails. Here I have a green and a brown. I know it's hard to see. I take the 2 tails and I put them at about the same length. I'll twist them a couple of times so that they think that they're one, and then I just tie a simple knot and pull that through. I have one little knot right there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's one little knot. Then I reach in front of the needle and unthread it, and I will pull the thread through the machine until the knot comes through, and then I'll hook it up into the automatic needle threader and throw the extra thread away. And now the needle is ready to be threaded. I have the design on a USB right here on the side of the machine. On the luminaire, I'm just going to touch it. We have sewing, embroidery, Disney, and my design center. I am going to use the embroidery feature. I'm going to touch the pocket for memory. So I am going to touch the USB, but I'm going to touch the JuJu Advent Calendar. I created that folder for the designs. And right here, here's my 6x10 pockets. And I'm going to touch this. We're going to use number 1 and number 5. And I'm going to touch set. Now, one thing I'd like to point out to you right here. This design is the 6x10. If I had the 5x7 hoop in here, the machine would tell me to change to a larger hoop. So the machine's pretty smart. If you only have a 5x7 machine and you pull up the 6x10 design on your screen, or you think you are, you probably won't see it. And that is to protect the machine from making it so that the hoop, when it gets going, slams into the side or causes any problem like that. Also, if you are using a magnetic hoop on your machine, do not worry. The machines today are designed to protect the brains of the machine from the magnets in the hoops, since they are pretty much industry standard. You don't need to worry about damaging your machine using a magnetic hoop. And go to embroidery. And I don't have to do anything with this at all. I'm just going to touch the green button. And it's going to stitch that out. I'm going to place this on here, fusible side up, so I can feel the little glue bumps. And what you do is you kind of look at it, and you want to make sure you have about 1/2 inch down here and 1/2 inch up here, and then push it over so we know we've got it right vertically. You just want to make sure that all of the placement lines are covered, and then just hit the button. You can tape this down if you want. You don't have to. Always keep your hands away from the needle. It's time to trim away the batting. So I'm going to lift the little lever and just pull the hoop out very carefully. Notice I have left my hand on the arm and I'm pulling the hoop out so I don't change the registration at all. I like to use a good pair of curved scissors. These are Gingers. I've had these for probably 10 years. You guys don't go cheap on these. The cheap ones will hurt your fingers. You just want to pull up the batting and trim as close to thread as possible. When you're trimming with these scissors, they have a curved bottom, and you want that curve to be flat on the stabilizer. You're going to want to have a trash can nearby as well in order to get all your little scraps. And then in the middle, I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. Try not to cut the stabilizer. If you do accidentally cut the stabilizer, then you want to take some tape and tape the hole closed, or you can patch with another little scrap of stabilizer or something like that. All right, this looks good. See how close it got there? These are great. I'm going to put it back into the machine. You're going to want to get that out of the way so you can see. Get it lined up, put your hand on the arm, and put it in there and push. Don't let the arm move, and put the lever back down. I'm going to do a thread color change to white. Now we can see where it's going to stitch 2 placement lines for the white fabric. If your little button is red and you can't figure out why, double check to make sure that your lever is down. So put your fabric over the placement line about 1/4 inch on either side, top and bottom, and then a little bit over the other side. Just make sure your fabric lines are completely covered. So here's that white line right there. That's the placement line. You want to come over that about 1/4 inch. Peppermint. This is going to take about 5 minutes to stitch out. Now I've got some detail work I need to trim in the face. I've got some tails that are hanging out there. They're not going to be interfered with by these next stitches, so I'm just going to leave them and clean them up when the design is finished. So it's going to stitch the 4 alignment lines. The next stitch is a placement line for the lining. Again, put the lining about 1/4 inch over the placement line, and you want to put the lining face down. You can tape it if you want, you don't have to. Oh, I hope that's low enough. I hope that catches. Whoop. So see, that was going to catch under the, I need to smoosh that down. You can raise your embroidery foot height if you want. That's going to take care of that. You can use any kind of pointed thing. A purple fang works really well for that as well. Okay. Placement line for the other pocket lining. And again, 1/4 inch over the line and face down. We are finished embroidering. Great. Tell it okay and remove it from the hoop. Awesome. This looks great. Now I'm going to clean up those little extra stitches on his face. This is where you want to have some little snips like these. These are curved on the bottom. They're serrated inside. They're very good. And I'll link to these below as well. And y'all, I just use the really pointy Revlon eyebrow tweezer. I prefer those for this kind of work. So I want to get that thread out. It got caught up under there. And then you grab it as close to the base as possible and pull it taut and snip, and it just goes away. And then, well, and then this one, I'm gonna try to pull it up, little loop. Pull this one up as tight as possible. That looks good. Okay. There, that was pretty easy to do. If you have any open gaps that you don't like, maybe your bobbin thread is coming through, feel free to grab a Sharpie and use that. There, that looks good. Okay. And I don't have any drama over here at all, so this one's ready to go. All right, we're ready to cut these out and get them pressed. Okay, we're ready to take this out of the hoop. I'm gonna loosen it up a little bit, just get it out of there. I'm gonna take my rotary cutter and just do a rough cut between the two. You can follow the directions. They tell you exactly how to cut this, but there's a lot of these to cut, and I kind of save them all and just do them all at one time, and I want to show you how. So I'm going to be using the Trimmer by George, and you can use any ruler that you want, but the Trimmer by George, what I want to do is fold back this lining top edge, and the Trimmer by George has a metal lip on it, and I'm just going to push it up very close to that thread seam line. And so I've got the lining fabric over here on this edge, and I'm going to fold it over, leaving this pocket front along with the SF101 and the stabilizer. And I'm going to use a large rotary cutter. The 60 millimeter is the recommended one. And I'm going to trim this off to remove the bulk. Okay, so I've gotten rid of that. And what that did was it removed all of the bulk that would be in the seam right up there. So it protected the edge of the stabilizer and the batting and the front pocket piece. And it's still nice and tight, just like that, okay? So I'm gonna leave this just like this. I'm gonna do this other one. I just do this a little bit different. This is just from experience, because I want to do them all at one time, okay? And I'm going to push this up, fold that over, trim away the bulk. Don't try this if you're not using the Trimmer by George. Your odds of messing it up are pretty high, and you don't want to cut into your pockets. Okay, so I have these other ones that have been done too. Now what I'm going to do is go over to the ironing board, and with it face down, I'm going to iron this way and push this piece this way, and then fold that over, aligning the edge of the lining with the edge of the pocket, and make sure that on the back here inside the pocket I can see that little bit of seam line so that it's nice and clean from the outside. Okay, so let's go do that. So here's our little peppermint. I'm going to lay it face down, and I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to give it some tension back here, and I'm just going to push this seam over. I've gotten rid of all of that bulk, so I'm pushing that seam over, and I might even give it a little steam. I'm going to use a clapper and press that seam down hard, okay? All right, now I can fold this over. Look how nice and clean that is, okay? Now I can fold this over, and I'm gonna match up the sides. It doesn't matter about the bottom, but I'm gonna match the sides so that my pocket is straight, so that I can see this seam line right here to the inside toward the lining. I'm going to press it down, give it a shot of steam so it stays where I want it to, and I'm going to press it with my clapper. If you don't have a clapper, I'll link to this one below. This one's by Riley Blake. If you don't have a clapper, confiscate a child's wooden block. You need something that is untreated wood, okay, so that it absorbs the steam. Look how nice that is. Now, some of these ripples are here. Don't worry about those. Those can be pressed out They are not going to be seen from the front of the pocket because all of this will be trimmed away. But what's on the pocket looks really good. So just like I mentioned, all of the fabric that is outside of the shaped batting is going to be cut away. So really all you need to do is right here on these stitch lines, you can just put your ruler right on the edge, trim that away, trim it away at the bottom, and trim away the other side. Very easy. But there you go. So now your pocket is ready to go onto the background fabric, and here are your little lines that are right there, so you can line them up with the marks that will be on the background fabric. Eventually you're going to have a whole stack of these things, like a deck of cards. Okay, all the pockets are done and we're ready to go to the background fabric. I'm getting ready to stitch another set of the design where we attach the pockets to the background fabric of the Advent calendar. Let me show you how I've got all of my stuff organized here. I have put all of the pockets together with which ones go together on each piece of the background fabric. And the way I stacked mine was I put the tops of 2 straight up, and then the next 2 I put the tops down to the bottom, and that just kind of keeps them straight, and I've got them stacked just like this. So I have got my batting ready, my background fabric, and the pockets. I want to caution you about a fabric choice. I got real close to using this fabric right here for the back of the pockets, and I'm glad I thought about it before I made them all because it would have been a disaster. This is kind of like a geometric print. It's very busy, but while it would be awesome cute, when you go to put the pockets together and sew them all together, where they meet, the design won't meet the same, and it's going to be a hot, busy mess. So I'm glad I thought about that before I got started on it. And I ended up going with an all-over print of snowflakes. A solid will work well, a blender will work well, but you just want to make sure that you don't choose something that's got definite lines on it like this, because you'll never get those to match up and it'll just look too crazy for you, I think. That's me personally. You can do what you want, but that's me. Okay. All right, so I'm ready to go. I'm gonna just hit embroidery and lock and go. And the first stitch is the placement line for the batting. And I'm gonna put the batting over it, equal amount on the outside of the stitch lines, on side to side, and making sure it's tucked up underneath the edges of both sides. That looks good. Okay. If you're wondering, this fabric is called Snowed In by Riley Blake. And make sure this, now if you are not using a trimmer by George, this is where you will remove the hoop and trim away the excess stabilizer around the tack down stitch. That looks good. The next stitch is the all over background quilting. And here's the placement lines for the pocket. Now we need to place the pockets on the lines. Okay, the first thing I do, even though I already set the pockets together with what's going to go where, I double check. This is page 5 of the instructions, and I double check to make sure the next one is 3 and 7. You do not want to mess that up because it'll be a disaster to try to get it fixed. Because my little stitch marking lines were in white, I put a purple mark on there with a friction marker so you can see it. But you want to line up those little lines with the edges, the top edge. I'm just going to put it right even like that. And then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm measuring from the top of the pocket to the very outermost stitch line, and it is 5/8 of an inch on this side and 5/8 of an inch on this side. That's important. I'm going to put some tape. It's important because this is the baseline for being straight. So I know that this pocket is straight because both outer edges are 5/8 of an inch away from that furthest stitch line. I'm going to tape the pocket down, and I am taping just kind of 1/4 of an inch on the edge of the fabric. You're going to go through some tape with this particular design. But I need these to stay put. I don't want them to move at all. So now it is ready to go back into the machine and have the tack down stitch done. Now it's time to trim away the outsides of the pockets. Now these curved embroidery scissors work pretty well, but if you have a smaller pair, these are Gingers as well. If you have a smaller pair, you may want to use them, because these corners up here, they're pretty hard. I'm gonna take my tape off. Maybe I can use it one more time. They're pretty hard to cut. If you've got arthritis pretty bad, you might need a grandchild or some help from somebody to get it started. So I'm just getting right in close to it and cutting in the back of the scissor, and then you want to pull up that edge and cut all of the fabric, the SF101, the stabilizer, everything. You want to get as close as possible. It does have a very wide zigzag stitch as the final satin stitching. I cut a little bit there. That's okay. That satin stitching will cover it. But you don't want to leave even like 1/8 of an inch out. It'll hurt your fingers. I'm glad I'm doing the cutting as I go, because if I did it all at one time, I'd be sore. Okay, ready to go back into the machine. It's going to do the final satin stitch, and then it's going to do an outside decorative stitch, and then it's going to do some little snowflakes on the top of the pot. Oh, that turned out just adorable. It looks great. Okay, and I have a stack of them over here. I'm going to trim them up all at once, just like the other blocks, using the trimmer by George. So that's how you attach the pockets. That will hold some Hershey's Kisses and a $1 bill or two, don't you think? How nice. I'd like to point out something on blocks C and D for the Whimsical Advent Calendar. And that is the fact that you can see here the background quilting goes over the top of the snowbank. And in block D, if you go through the sequence, you can see we have the batting placement, batting tack down, fabric tack down, and in the other two blocks, A and B, the next stitch is the all over background quilting. But in C and D, there is the placement line for the snowbank, there's the tack down for the snowbank, and there is the all over quilting. So my all over quilting is in a navy blue, and I don't want navy blue stitching to be on top of my snowbank. So I'm going to change the stitch order on blocks C and D to move the all over background quilting so that it happens before the snowbank. And to do that, I've highlighted the background quilting, and I'm going to grab the picture, not on the words, but on the picture. Just grab it and hover it over the one you want it to be after. So I'm going to drop it right there. So here's the fabric tack down now. There's the all over background quilting. There's the placement line for the snowbank and the tack down for the snowbank and onto the other parts of the design. If you do not have software to be able to do this and you want to do it, what you can do is use the needle plus minus button on your machine and jump ahead to stitch number 6 and stitch that one out after number 3. And when it finishes stitching, then use your needle plus minus button to go back to color stop number 4 and stitch 4 and 5, and then skip 6 and then continue on with the design. I'm going to do it now. This is block D. I'm going to do it now on block C as well. It is color stop number 4. This is the all over background quilting. And then there's my snowbank placement, snowbank tack down, and so on. I just wanted to share that with you. If you are using an all over background quilting stitch color that you don't want on top of your snowbank, you might want to do that. All right, I have my magnetic hoop on the multi-needle prepped with no-show mesh, and I have a strip of batting cut that will fit right on here. I just use it in a strip, and then that way I actually save batting that way. And I do the same thing with the fabric. I have the fabric already prepped on the back with SF101 to prevent any puckering from the dense fill stitching that's going to occur in this design. Okay, so we're all ready to go. I am going to just tell the machine, let me back out so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to tell the machine lock and go. It's going to do the placement line for the batting. And it stops so I can put the batting down. I'm going to speed up the machine a little bit. I had it set down to 700 stitches per minute for another project I was working on. I'm going to bump it up to the 1,000, which is the default. Okay, I'm going to place my batting up here. I'm just going to put a little clip on the front of this just so it doesn't pull off because I've got weight dragging it. Here's the tack down line for the batting. Okay, I have a trimmer by George, so I am not going to trim the batting in the hoop right now. Or if you have one and you're not going to use it, then you would remove the hoop now and trim the batting away from all around the outside of the tack down line. So I have my fabric now with the SF101 on the back, and I'm just going to place it right where it needs to go, smooth everything out, make sure there's no bubbles. And now it's going to jump automatically into the background stitching. Placement line for the moon. All right, I'm going to put the fabric for the moon down. Now I'm going to trim away the moon fabric. When you trim away fabric for applique, you want to work on a firm, flat surface, and I'm using curved scissors. These are Gingers. They have a nice curved bottom on them. Don't go cheap on those. Curved scissors can be expensive, and the cheap ones will hurt your fingers. So they are an investment into your embroidery journey, and you'll be glad you bought the good ones. I've had these for 10 plus years. You're going to trim very close around the moon. There you go. If you're going to do lap work, that's fine, but you need to put something firm on your lap like a quilter's cut and press or something like that. Next is the final satin stitch for the moon. is so much applique on block C with this singing snowman and polar bear that I went ahead and created SVG files for those applique pieces using the Embroider software, and then I'm cutting them out using the Scan and Cut. I'll link to a video right up here to show you how that's done. This is an enormous time saver if you can do this and not have to remove the hoop each time and trim away the fabric. Instead, you're just removing the hoop and ironing the piece on. Much faster, much easier. You might notice that I have substrate side down on this purple 24-inch mat, and that's because the mat is not brand new, and so it's not as sticky as it was. It's probably got the stickiness now of like a new low-tack mat. So I put substrate side down and pretty side up. If this was a brand new mat, I would put pretty side down and I'd leave the paper on and do paper side up. I'm also going to leave all the pieces on the mat. I have identified the white pieces. I'll see if I can get close and show you. I've written on there with the friction marker what each white piece is. And then you might notice too, in the corners of each white piece, there's a little red mark, and that helps me to identify the edges of the fabric on the screen when I'm placing pieces. All done. Oh man, that's much better than doing that by hand in the hoop. I have the design on my USB, so I'm gonna touch the symbol for USB, and it's in, I think it's in DBJJ Designs folder. Yes, here it is. And it says it's too large for the extra large embroidery frame. If you plan to add more patterns, rotate the pattern combination. I'm gonna hit 90. Okay, so it just means it can't do it vertically, it's gonna do it horizontally, and that's fine, that's no big deal. So I'm gonna hit set and edit end. Okay. Now I need to assign the threads that are on the back of the machine. So I'm going to hit these 3 spools right here. If you cannot see these 3 spools, if that button is grayed out on your machine, go down here to the little piece of paper, that's your properties. Go into that or your settings, go back to page 7, and you want manual color sequence to be on. And that way you can set your own thread colors and tell it okay. And I'm just going to touch it now. The first one is the batting placement line. I'll just do that in red so you can see it. That's on spool number 2. And then the next one is the batting tack down. Before it stitches that, I need it to stop. So I'm going to put the hand up and tell it to stop. On this machine, you don't stitch and stop. You stop and then stitch. So I do want it to stop before it stitches that, and that will be spool number 2 as well. And then this is the fabric tack down. Before it stitches that, I need it to stop so I can put the fabric on there. And then number 4 is the decorative stitching, and that is going to be spool number 6, the white. I'm going to tell it okay. And embroidery. All right, we're ready to go. Here is the placement line for the batting. It stopped. I'm going to put the batting down. This is a great use of batting scraps. if you're not using the trimmer by George, you're going to want to remove the hoop now and trim away the batting from all around the border blocks. Okay, it's all finished. I'm just gonna touch OK so it quits blinking and get the next 3 remaining J blocks finished. Now it's time to trim up the border blocks that I just stitched, so I just want to show you how I do that. I'm going to turn the camera down so you can see. And I'm just going to pop these out of the hoop. Like I said, I'm conserving fabric, so that's why I'm not cutting the blocks of fabric ahead of time. And you can see I got right up next to the selvage edge. I'm going to use the trimmer by George. If you don't have one of these, the trimmer by George has a metal edge. I've got a link to this below in the description box. It has a 1/4 inch high metal ledge right here that protects the fabric and allows you to trim the batting and the stabilizer super close. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim up the short side. I usually save my trimming for the end, but I wanted to show you this one set of blocks. So you just take the metal edge and you push it up close. Now it doesn't matter if you have a trimmer by George, original 2.0 or 3.0, they are all the same. They've just gone through a little bit of production changes as far as the type of acrylic and metal and all that that's used. Just flipped it like this, right? I did it like that. And once it comes back over, now the measurement markings are right side up to you and you could trim your 1/2 inch. So I'll do this side now, push it right up against the seam line and fold it over to protect the fabric. I'm making sure that I'm only getting the fabric and I'm going to trim off all of the batting. You want to use the 60mm rotary cutter. The smaller ones have their little button right there. Sometimes won't let you get a deep cut and it doesn't work well. So they recommend you use this larger rotary cutter. That's the only reason I bought this big rotary cutter. And I use it all the time for this purpose. Now that I've got the batting trimmed super close, look what a good cut that is. Okay, that's absolutely perfect. That's what I'm after. Now I can just see through the ruler and cut my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So in actuality, I only used about 6 inches of fabric. And then you've got an inch here, so you have your 1/2 inch that you need in between the 2 blocks. Okay. And now I'm going to just pull up the fabric and trim this. This is a huge time saver from having to trim in the hoop. If you're going to be making a bunch of projects like these over your embroidery journey, you will definitely want to invest in a trimmer by George. This is exclusive to Hoop Sisters. So even though I've got a little bit of selvage here, the white part, it's no big deal because that's going to be in the seam allowance. When we sew it together, we're going to sew based on where these seams are right here. But look at that, it's perfect, okay? So that's going to be hidden in the seam allowance, but it turned out beautiful. Awesome. Well, I'm going to finish trimming this one up and then get back on the multi-needle and make the rest of the border blocks.